In this video, we'll show how to configure the Cisco 9800 series Catalyst wireless controller with the advanced wireless configuration menu settings to get your networks up and running. In front of us here, we have a day zero configured wireless LAN controller and a joined but also day zero configured wireless access point, just one in our deployment here so far. So to make sure we're ready for our settings, I just want to kind of highlight what we have set up already. Important in our design here is our VLAN structure. We want to make sure that our network settings are created and available prior to going through and administering our wireless LAN settings. So in this case, we have two different VLANs in this environment. We don't have anything tied to a VTP, although that can be recommended if your environment is running in that, so you have all the VLANs available at your disposal. Here we've created them manually for the controller as it pertains to our environment across the board. One is our VLAN 100, that is our controller management domain. And then VLAN 10 here is our Catalyst employee VLAN as well. We'll have that available and named accordingly for our solution set. When we're ready with all of our network configuration, we can now go into two different locations to bring up our advanced wireless configuration menu. From the top navigation bar, if we mouse over this wireless setup icon, we can click on it and be brought to two different types, a basic or advanced wireless setup. Or, if we prefer to use the configuration flyout menu, at the very bottom you have your wireless setup, basic and advanced. Either way will take you to the same place. Once we're here, we're greeted with a flow chart that shows us exactly what we're going to get involved with to build out our wireless network parameters. Again, for this, we're taking advantage of our wireless LAN, our site profiles, and our radio profiles to build up our networks across the board to have our clients join our broadcasted wireless SSIDs. The goal of this is to set up the structure so we know how we're building it, why we're building it, and what applies where to which specific access points that are available. The rule for this design is really here to help us understand and where these solutions can be applied without having to go through the manual configuration of doing it from the configuration flyout window. We can do the same settings manually from our join, policies, tags, wireless LANs, all from our menu settings here. And once we configure our advanced day zero setup style configuration, we of course can go back here and make any modifications there again. But if we do like the flow and like the organization of this way, we can continue to use that as we add, modify, and configure more wireless LANs, more access points, and more policies into our environment without having to be specific of our configurations here. This puts us in a very good mindset as a guided step deployment phase. So it gives us some nice ideas of what we're going to be involved with, how we employ them to access points, and then the different icons that you're met with as you go through this navigation structure. So with that, let's start now. Once we've started this design, we'll still see our flow chart here and also understand top to bottom what we've applied and where we've added our environment variables to this point. So let's start at the very beginning with our mandatory section of wireless LAN policy structure of profiles and tags. So we have two different options of adding a wireless LAN, or we have the ability to see any LANs we have built up to this point so we can make any reference changes against them. Since it is a day zero configuration, I knew we had nothing configured, but I like to go to this list view anyways because it helps me understand if something was there, I don't overwrite it or make a duplicate change to something that I may have already done in the past. Once we're at this level, we'll still see our structure journey, but now we're met with the ability to add our wireless LANs. I'll click Add, and on top of that same navigation window, we're met with a pop-up window specific to our wireless LAN credentials. My profile name here, I'll call Catalyst, taking a cue from our Catalyst 9800. Once I do that, it'll automatically assume that's the SSID name that I want, and it assumed correctly because it is. It is our first wireless LAN, so it is properly tagged as number 1, and by default, the status is disabled, so it will not open up this broadcast until I've completed and gone back manually through all of my steps to allow this on my access point of control. I can be doubly guarded by also disabling my broadcast SSID to make sure that if I did enable something, again, clients can't join erroneously into my environment, and we can disable both of them to be doubly sure that this will not have any issues of clients seeing a network before it's ready for deployment. I can set the radio policy to 5 gigahertz or 2.4 only, or I can be nice and allow all clients to associate, which is what I'm going to do here. I will then move over to the security tab within this window, and I met with both layer 2, 3, and all my AAA functionality for this wireless LAN. We can configure our security modes, and now available is WPA3 to take advantage of the most current generation of wireless security settings available. For our deployment, we're going to keep it very standard for our environment and say I'm not going to do WPA3 yet, but let's take a look at what happens when I do move to that direction. If I do toggle that drop-down, it does automatically put my protected management frame section into an optional format. A drop-down is available for disabled, optional, or required. Again, a very important piece of the WPA3 structure. And again, any other type of settings I want along with that. If I didn't care for WPA3, I could move to WPA2, and if I do that, it does not default my management frame section back to disabled mode. So I'll have to do that manually in this design. In our policy structure, I'm going to move this from an 802.1x to a pre-shared key. I can only have one available. I will make sure I untoggle the 802.1x default, and then move ourselves into a very fun Cisco 321 pre-shared key password for this solution. If I had any layer 3 settings, I can apply them here. AAA, anything I inherited from my AAA configuration prior, or any advanced settings I may have specific to this wireless LAN I could take advantage of here as well. Next client count connections, transition supports, any AX functionality I want to really fine tune in this environment. For our configuration design, we're going to leave these at default status. I will apply them to the device, and once I do, this list view now has one in its list, our new Catalyst wireless LAN, in a default of disabled status, which we've done here. Notified we've done both broadcast and the status for the wireless LAN itself. If I had a list of wireless LANs available, I can toggle the entire row and enable or disable them accordingly. So it allows me to do some nice easy changes across the board from this list view. Now that I've satisfied building out my wireless LAN, I can now move into my wireless policy. By default, you'll have a, default policy profile that's available that you can tie the solution into. If you wanted to go and be something more specific and tied to your environment variables, we can add that here as well. I will do that. I'll call this policy my Catalyst BTC policy for our Business Transformation Center. Description for BTC. We can set any of these settings up as need be across our policy profiles, access policies as we need to tie them, quality of service, mobility, and advanced functionality. So let's take a look and apply some policies here. Because we set up our VLAN structure ahead of time, I can now add our VLAN 10 Catalyst employee count to this environment. In a quality of service setting, we can enable anything we want here. I will enable enterprise settings for our deployment and use that as my, again, very generic and default configuration for my enterprise Catalyst type profile. And from here, leaving the rest of these setups ready to go. One thing you'll notice we did not tag is that this is currently in a disabled state. If we noticed when we looked at the initial naming convention, we have to go back and enable this policy profile. Once we do, we will see that it now is in an enabled status, both this and the default policy as well. I can go back to default, disable it, because now I have a second one joined, and now we only have one policy profile available for our environment. When I'm ready to go and build a policy tag, we're now going to start binding our wireless LANs, the profile, and the policy profile together to create one cohesive tag that we can apply to our access points. Again, I'm going to name this as Catalyst BTC for the BTC. And now we can add our wireless policy. This will be to our profile of Catalyst for our wireless LAN, our Catalyst BTC profiles, everything we've tied to that, hit the check mark, and now we've applied this tag to this specific solution, linking this profile for wireless LAN to this profile for the policy credentials I want along with that. If we need to do any RLAN functionality, that can be down here as well, but for our purposes, we're doing just wireless LAN for this design. Once we've done that, we've now created our tag linking our wireless and policy together for our overall solution. And if we remember our overall flow, this was the only mandatory piece of our deployment. But let's walk through the rest of them as we can see how the access points can join and the RF profiles can be created and applied to our access points. Under our APC join profile, we will look at an already established BTC credential we may have already created. In this case, this join profile will give me a lot of the feature functionality needed for the access points as they learn about my wireless controller of what they will inherit as they connect for the first time into our design. I'll put an NTP server. Do we want the LED state to be on? Yes. Any client credentials? Again, we're going to keep a lot of this at the default, but just kind of walking through what's available for these types of setups. The high availability setup. Any advanced functionality we want to enable, like data encryption or jumbo frames. The access point itself. What are we doing for any statistics, client, authentication configuration, any type of power configuration we want with this as well. Hyperlocation can be a toggle functionality. The new 9100 series Catalyst access points have Bluetooth functionality built in we can take advantage of here as well. Any specific packet capture profile we want to apply here can be joined. The management of our access point we can keep at global settings for the device, the user, the credentials, discovery protocol, any rogue access point functionality, or again, any packet capture we want to enable for the access points here again. So a lot of this we're keeping at defaults, but again, the functionality is here. As you enable these access points to join your environment, you can very much fine-tune them to your solution set. And now our BTC profile is joined there. A flex profile can be created if you're in a flex deployment mode. Our case will be local, so we're going to move past this one. And then the site tag here again. This BTC tag will be our Business Transformation Center for the BTC. Our join profile will be appropriately the BTC, and a control plane name will be our default control plane for configuration purposes here. This is a local site, and we've enabled it as such. We're not doing flex in this deployment. Update, and now we have our site and AP join profile that we will apply to our access points and overall controller design. Moving down to the RF profiles, these are built by default in the controller for both low, high, and typical client densities. We can add our own deployment name. So if we want to say, 80 megahertz specifically, 5 gigahertz band, and now we can create any type of operational rates we want to have involved in here, any type of profile thresholds, coverage, power, and I'm going to say, I don't want best, I know I want 80 megahertz for this environment. I will hard code this to be an 80 megahertz channel width structure. Any advanced functionality again here as well with airtime fairness, flexible radio assignments. We can do a lot of functionality from the radio settings in this specific profile, which we can enable our environment to use. So if we want to go beyond the Cisco defaults of low, typical, and high client densities and say, hey, I want to have a specific always-on 80 megahertz profile, I can build that and now apply that to our environment if need be. And we apply that by going into, again, our BTC protocol, our structure we have here. Instead of doing our low client density, I'm going to say, yes, I want 80 megahertz to be the credentials for the 5 gigahertz band, and then for 2.4, I didn't create anything specific for it, so I'll keep it as low client density in the 2.4 realm. Otherwise, I can just use the default settings from Cisco's best practices and go along with that. But I'll be greedy and keep myself at 80 megahertz, because that's how I like my bandwidth. Now we've reached the end of our advanced setups with the profiles of wireless LAN, access point, and radio frequency top to bottom here. Last thing to do is look at my access points that I have that my controller has already discovered. Select all, or in this case, the one, and we can now tag that access point for this policy, this site, this RF credential, apply to my device, and now I've walked through and have completed every step to get this access point onto the right network, the right procedure, the right RF that I need for this solution to be applicable. I can now go back into any of these settings here from the configuration window. So if I click on wireless LANs, I will remember that, hey, my wireless network, well, all the settings we had created was not enabled until I went through this final step. And now I can go back through and see all the same list of wireless LANs I had in my journey of advanced wireless configuration is now available in the pure configuration mode that I can go and make any enhancements or changes to after that initial deployment. I'll broadcast, I'll enable, I'll update, hit OK, and now clients can now start associating to my access point with those credentials as they now are seen by their client device. If I go back to my dashboard, I can now see that I do have a wireless LAN created. If I click on that from the dashboard, it will take me back to the configuration of that wireless LAN. So it is nice to have kind of a navigational dashboard that will have you jump into the respective categorization of the configuration you want to make, whether it be the access point, the client, or the wireless LAN in that solution set. So from here, we now have set up our access points and controller to be available to serve clients with the right radio, with the right functionality, and then as I onboard more access points, I can easily just tag them into that profile and have them join the controller, inherit all those settings, and now we're off to the design and ready to roll.
Kiss me close. Gabriel, how far will you go for love?